Hello, online pipe community. Ethan, parsimonious piper. And this week I am again together with,
Father Brian Potter Piper.
and we are going to be covering letter 11 in C.S. Lewis' Screwtape letters. Let's not waste any time and dive right in. My dear Wormwood, everything is clearly going very well. I'm especially glad to hear that the two new friends have now made him acquainted with their whole set. All these, as I find from the record office, are thoroughly reliable people, steady, consistent scoffers and worldlings who, without any spectacular crimes, are progressing quietly and comfortably toward our Father's house. You speak of there being great laughters. I trust this does not mean that you are under the impression that laughter, as such, is always in our favor. The point is worth some attention. I divide the causes of human laughter into joy, fun, the joke proper, and flippancy. You will see the first among friends and lovers reunited on the eve of a holiday. Among adults, some pretext in the way of jokes is usually provided, but the facility with which the smallest witticisms produce laughter at such a time shows that they are not the real cause. What that real cause is, we do not know. Something like it is expressed in much of that detestable art which the humans call music, and something like it occurs in heaven, a meaningless acceleration in the rhythm of celestial experience, quite opaque to us. Laughter of this kind does us no good and should always be discouraged. Besides, the phenomenon is of itself disgusting and a direct insult to the realism, dignity, and austerity of hell. Fun is closely related to joy, a sort of emotional froth arising from the play instinct. It is very little use to us. It can sometimes be used, of course, to divert humans from something else which the enemy would like them to be feeling or doing. But in itself, it has wholly undesirable tendencies. It promotes charity, courage, contentment, and many other evils. The joke proper, which turns on sudden perception of incongruity, is a much more promising field. I'm not thinking primarily of indecent or bawdy humor, which, though much relied upon by second rate tempters, is often disappointing in its results. The truth is that humans are pretty clearly divided on this matter into two classes. There are some to whom no passion is as serious as lust, and for whom any indecent story ceases to produce lasciviousness precisely insofar as it becomes funny. There are others in whom laughter and lust are excited at the same moment and by the same things. The first sort joke about sex because it gives rise to many incongruities. The second cultivate incongruities because they afford a pretext for talking about sex. If your man is of the first type, bawdy humor will not help you. I shall never forget the hours which I wasted, hours to me of unbearable tedium, with one of my early patients in bars and smoking rooms before I learned this rule. Find out which group the patient belongs to and see to it that he does not find out. The real use of jokes or humor is in quite a different direction, and it is especially promising among the English who take their sense of humor so seriously that a deficiency in this sense is almost the only deficiency at which they feel shame. Humor is for them the all consoling and, mark this, the all excusing grace of life. Hence, it is invaluable as a means of destroying shame. If a man simply lets others pay for him, he is mean. If he boasts of it in a jocular manner and twits his fellows with having been scored off, he's no longer mean, but a comical fellow. Mere cowardice is shameful. Cowardice boasted of with humorous exaggerations and grotesque gestures can be passed off as funny. Cruelty is shameful, unless the cruel man can represent it as a practical joke. A thousand bawdy or even blasphemous jokes do not help towards a man's damnation so much as his discovery that almost anything he wants to do can be done, not only without the disapproval, but with the admiration of his fellows, if only it can get itself treated as a joke. And this temptation can be almost entirely hidden from your patient by that English seriousness about humor. Any suggestion that there might be too much of it can be represented to him as puritanical, or as betraying a lack of humor. But flippancy is the best of all. In the first place, it's very economical. Only a clever human can make a real joke about virtue or indeed about anything else. Any of them can be trained to talk as if virtue were funny. Among flippant people, the joke is always assumed to have been made. No one actually makes it, but every serious subject is discussed in a manner which implies that they have already found a ridiculous side to it. If prolonged, the habit of flippancy builds up around a man the finest armor plating against the enemy that I know, and it is quite free from the dangers inherent in the other sources of laughter. It's 1,000 miles away from joy. It deadens instead of sharpening the intellect, and it excites no affection between those who practice it. Your affectionate uncle, Screwtape.
Thank you, Ethan. As I read this letter, I was so appreciative of how Lewis brings something that can seem so light, and not punning the letter on laughter. But as I was really reading it, it really challenged me to look at, how do I find, joy and fun and laughter in my own life. And he uses the bookends of joy and flippancy. Joy, which pretty much uh, is something from God, or the enemy, as Screwtape would say, and flippancy, which is something that benefits, as Screwtape would say, our Father below, creating that armor around one's heart, to where you really can't enjoy joy. And then Lewis goes kind of in the middle with fun, which leans towards joy, and then the joke proper, which can more easily lean towards the flippancy. Not that they have to. When I was reflecting upon joy and fun, what came to mind was like a baby laughing, kids, little kids, just running around and playing and laughing because there's no joke there. There's no joke proper. They're just enjoying each other's company. Um, and even social media, people will send, a little something about a baby laughing. And I remember one said, watch this and try to have a bad day. And kind of reflecting to that, like a baby laughing. And I think to myself, there's no joke. So what is a baby enjoying? And there's that beauty of that simplicity where there's no, you know, there's no garbage between one's heart and God. There's no stuff with a baby. It's just that simplicity of being, of being in God. And for a baby to look at you and just smile and to laugh and to experience pure joy. Um, you know, I always try to look at joy as, to be able to enjoy the presence of the other for the sake of the other. And especially to be able to do that with God. Where sometimes, in prayer, as we've talked in the other letters, I can get so serious in prayer, like life can get so serious. And then I'm reminded, how about just sit here and enjoy God's presence? And I see how so many times life, and I can allow the hardness of life or the flippancy, as he says, to really kind of beat me down. And so I was really appreciative of Lewis and giving this way to look at laughter, to look at the grades of joy, to flippancy. So it really challenged me to kind of reflect and to look at myself.
Yeah, and I want to take a couple of these even little deeper. Flippancy. Flippancy is so dangerous for Christians in particular because, as an example, how often do we hear people scoff at the notions of traditional sexual morality of waiting until marriage until you have sex. Oh, we laugh at that. That's old fashioned. Ha ha ha. Well, that kind of flippancy has driven divorce rates. You'll find that divorce is 2 or 3 times more likely among people who had sex before marriage than among people who waited. There may be many reasons for that, and as always, correlation is not causation, but there's always a little bit of fire where there's some smoke. Um, so that kind of flippancy that we have toward what we think of as traditional, i.e., Christian morals, uh, can be very dangerous because it creeps into Christian groups. The church at large does not take sexual morality nearly as seriously as it used to. We've become kind of blasé about it ourselves as a group, and it shows. It shows in the fact that the uh, the rates of divorce overall uh, are not that much higher outside the church now than they are in. Now, there are all kinds of reasons that that statistic is true, but the point is that we have lost a lot of ground in having moral conversations because we too have become flippant about what is and isn't moral. Now, to back up one into the joke proper, uh, this is one that hits very close to home for me, and here's why. My generation's great sitcom was Friends. And Friends was, from a comedy standpoint, brilliantly written. I don't enjoy Friends anymore. I used to like it a lot. Why don't I enjoy it anymore? Well, because every time it's on, the entire show is about sexual immorality and about who's sleeping with whom and who wants to sleep with whom. And at some point, to me, I start getting convicted. Yeah, I found the show humorous when it was on and I was younger. And now when I look at it and I see the broken lives of people my age who I've known since high school or college that followed that kind of thinking, I find it less humorous. Um, One that hits very close to home in terms of this particular letter, Monty Python. Monty Python is a brilliantly funny troupe. And yet, from a morality standpoint, they cross lines a lot. And it's not just, it's he talks about humor, the laugh in the joke property is seeing incongruity. And it's not that they poke fun at morality, it's that some of the things they do espouse immorality and they do it in a humorous way. And I find myself laughing at Monty Python less and less as some of these things start to bubble up in my mind that, well, yeah, that's funny, but is it really, is it edifying to me? Is it in any way building me up or helping me advance in my walk of faith? So there's a lot of stuff like that that he talks about using humor to justify bad behavior, all kinds of caddish behavior, whether it's, you know, leeching off of your friends and having them pay for it and, and making a joke about them being, the fools for having paid or, those types of things. Well, we can justify all kinds of bad behavior by calling it sophisticated, whether it's through sophisticated humor or simply saying that, well, our new morality is more sophisticated than the old morality, so it must be better. And we can do that quite easily, justifying things that we know otherwise are wrong.
You brought to mind as you were talking and sharing the how it's very difficult for us in our it's very difficult to live to ideals, and uh, whether we look at marriage or in my particular tradition, we'll call it the sacrament uh, of marriage, and most people have a difficult time living up to that ideal. And like you said, the so it's easier to be flippant and laugh at the virtue of those who might try to do it. And instead of realizing all of us are called to live to that virtue, to that ideal, to God's love and presence to us, even if we fall. It just brought to mind how often do we lower our ideals, and we do so in that using some sort of laughter or that flippancy, ultimately to protect the fact that we don't want to strive for it. We don't want to strive to that ideal. Then I was also thinking about even today and how there seems to be such a, now this might be moving a little bit, but there's such a discussion how the younger generation, like college generation and so forth, there's such a seriousness or looking to be offended, where it's almost like being funny is being scrutinized to such a sense where do we take ourselves too serious? And I think that's where the bookends can come, where, you know, we really need to look at if we're making light of that in which is good, that in which is virtuous. And then at the same time, is there something happening within our generations, our younger generation, where there's such a sensitivity to maybe humor itself, where we're looking to be offended? And I don't necessarily where that point's going to go. It's just something that's been on my mind, and this and C.S. Lewis just kind of brought it to my mind and heart.
Well, you talk about expectations. I think that very often, yes, we lower our expectations of morality overall because we don't want to have to live up to something that's difficult. Um, we also do it very often, at least on a public side, so that we, as the last letter pointed out, we continue to fit in. We laugh at things that we know are inappropriate because everyone else is laughing at them in a nod to peer pressure, and we join in that flippancy, and that's very damaging to ourselves. I was always taught, and I was fortunate in this, that I should lower my expectations of others' behavior without ever lowering my expectations of my own.
Could you share that again? I'm trying that really trying to hit that there. Think about that.
Yeah.
That quote you just used. Yeah.
I was taught to always lower my expectations of others and never lower my expectations of myself. The reasoning behind that is the higher expectations you put on other people, the greater level of disappointment you are going to face in your own life. That because people are going to disappoint you. You yourself will disappoint you. We do all the time. We're disappointed with our own behavior. However, we know the standard that we should be striving for, and we need to not be holding other people accountable to that standard. It's ourselves that we hold accountable. And this when we and this is where that flippancy comes in. The more that we lightly dismiss, because it's already been assumed that there's a joke there. Um, the morals that have been in place and that God Himself put in place, the more we are likely to lower our expectations of our own behavior, and there's a real danger there. That road leads to spiritual stagnation.
Yeah. I like that because yeah, okay. Yeah.
And
There'll
by
be
the way,
some
if you want a really good discussion on expectations, another person far wiser and more experienced than I that I've heard talk about this is Dennis Prager, the conservative Jewish commentator here in the U.S. radio show. If you do an online search for Dennis Prager expectations, you'll find a number of essays and videos that he has done that talk about exactly that, about um, lowering your expectations of other people. What he doesn't emphasize so much is the not lowering your own expectations, because there is a standard that we should be striving for, even though we know we're imperfect and we will fail to reach it.
That seems very similar to, yeah, the, you know, if we have such a sensitivity to other people, then it really allows us to not have to look at ourselves, because we're always looking out. And where if we, yeah, that's interesting. Okay, I'm really, yeah, thinking the,
Got the wheels turning, huh?
yeah, because it's, yeah, I'm trying to put that together, because it's,
Folks, this is where you can see that our weekly things are not scripted. We, we're bouncing things off of each other as we go.
the, and but you're right that those two statements have to be put together. If you're going to lower your expectations of others, you have to keep your expectations for yourself higher, not to look down on someone else.
Correct.
That's the important thing, because it's almost like, in the script, love the sinner, hate the sin. We tend to emphasize one side or the other. And those two statements have to be so closely aligned with each other, just like the ones that you said.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I'm going to be critical of someone else, I need to look at that log in my own eye first.
Right. And it may be a log from a completely different tree.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I look down on the drunk on the street, I go, well, come on, I don't drink that much. Well, no, but I may have some other sin that he doesn't even struggle with as a homeless person. I may be focused on my stuff and the comfort of my life. Well, he doesn't have that, so he's not focused on it. The log, like I said, it may come from a completely different species of tree, and so we don't see it because we're so focused on his failings instead of looking at what ours are. And that really is, it's one of the reasons that I really like that Lewis ended with the flippancy, because it's so easy to use that and to just very lightly say, oh, well, I'm not as bad as so and so, and to flippantly say, yeah, I'm not a drug addict, I haven't, I have not squandered my job and that sort of thing to drugs or alcohol or whatever else vice it may be, so I can't be all that bad. And we can be very, very flippant about those kinds of dismissals, and yeah, and miss the log in our own eye.
Hmm.
Are we there?
Yeah, I think so. What do you think? I mean, I think so.
I think we've picked it apart, folks. Well, thanks for joining us, and a little more of a peek behind the process. Um, that our talks are not scripted. We're just banging ideas around like two guys with a pipe and a Bible. So I hope you've enjoyed that. I hope it's given you something to think about, and that you do lean away from the kind of flippancy that can just be soul deadening. While you do that, light something you like. We'll see you next week.